Indie Cross is a series that I've become obsessed with ever since its second episode dropped, and I don't think anyone will blame me for that. In fact, I really want to make a video analyzing why it's so good, but that will have to come later. So if you want to see that, plugs aside, with how good this animation is, I and many others are hyped to see what's to come. And with the third episode being teased recently at the time of writing this, I want to do a video discussing what could be next in the series, or at least what we can expect from the next 2 or 3 episodes. So without any further ado, let us get right on to the prediction. Before I can even try to go into specifics, I feel like it's important to establish how each episode will be structured. We know episode 3 is around 20 minutes in length and features 2 groups of characters, with each adding 1 extra character. And since we already have Zag and V1 is most certainly the other new character, we already have our character list all laid out. The question is, if episode 4 and potentially 5 will also be like that. I'd guess yes. Okay, but why am I even bringing up episode 5? Well, while we do have Meline and Drifter and Cuphead and Nico, we also have 2 other groups not yet talked about, Frisk and Ghost and Beheaded. In fact, I think our Undying Royals will be encountering V1. I know that's a wild statement, but hear me out. We know that petrification will be explored in episode 3, and I have some reason to assume that petrification is a pocket dimension. And this pocket dimension will be a great B-plot for episode 4, since MORO has stated that he wants characters to use weapons they don't normally use. We also know that V1 will fight some of the main cast, which makes this even more possible. I'm fairly certain that Cuphead and Nico will be in episode 5, but our B-plot cast can be interchanged. However, Frisk does have the potential to join up with Shovel Knight and Zagrias, though it is unlikely. While Meline and Knight had emphasis in episode 2, so did Frisk. Then, with Shovel Knight and Zagrias almost certainly being in Waterfall, it offers the perfect setting for Frisk to remember they are genocides and complete their arc. It also matches up with how episode 3 may have Undertale credits instead of Celeste credits, since Meline isn't going to be in episode 3. Now again, this is unlikely, and I don't really believe it. Not only is it very loose, but everything can be flipped on its head. The emphasis could just mean that Frisk is going to be in episode 4, and it also makes a lot of sense for Frisk not to appear in their own game's credits if it does reference the Undertale's battle menu. Again, I don't see this as a huge possibility, just food for thought. But enough about potentially the funniest joke ever. Let's talk about the Zagrias-shaped elephant in the room, because I'm gonna be honest, no way this guy doesn't die. Now, I will say I don't know anything about Hades, and I don't want to spoil myself for it, but we already have too many main characters. So then, how does this guy die? Well, in my mind, there's one clear answer. Charlotte. We were teased for this new version, and I can't think of anything else that would line up with this quote. So while the rogues are attacking V1, they could realize Charlotte is there and try to go for her, only for her to teleport where Shovel Knight is. Now, I will admit that has very low odds happening, but to me, it makes a lot of sense in terms of the narrative. Shield Knight sacrifices herself for Shovel Knight gets therapy, fights the person responsible for Shield Knight sacrificing themselves, only for the same thing to happen again with Zagrias, as Shovel Knight then finds himself in a new dimension. Actually, speaking of dimensions, I think it's time we try to find out where the other characters are going to. Or at least these 2 groups, cause... Now, when I talk about where these 2 groups could potentially go to, I'm having it also be the same where the new character is from, for my own convenience. Now, I'm still making guesses with the idea that they could go to different worlds, but again, convenience. So, let's start off with some ground rules. 1. No repeating franchises. While we do have Waterfall, I'm also guessing characters here. 2. It stands to reason that these universes have to be more or less well known in the indie scope. So, sorry totally accurate Battle Simulator fans, we likely ain't winning. 3. I'm gonna remove anything that at any time was not an indie game. So, while Madness Project Nexus could still be in the canon, I doubt we're seeing any more of Hank. Now with that, let's start off with the one we are likely gonna see last. Cuphead and Nico. Actually, before that, this is my message to the Indie Cross community. They have the lamp. How have people never realized that they put the light bulb into the lamp to brighten up Grillby's? It's so obvious. Okay, with that done, let's actually talk about their adventure. There are actually a few possible scenarios. If this duo does appear in episode 5, I can see them doing a montage. I mean, Cuphead has been through this song and dance a few times now. Then eventually, maybe during the montage, we see something weighing on Nico before the two land in a peaceful indie game that allows Nico to just vent to Cuphead and possibly a new indie character. So during that montage, we may see games like Hotline Miami, Curse of the Necrodancer, and Alien Hominid. However, if that doesn't happen, then they will probably just have their adventure be in either the Ori or Bendy games. While I haven't played the Ori games yet, the huge monsters are great for Cuphead, and the dark world is great for Nico. Then, with the Bendy games, while Bendy is likely in his own place or just dead, the entire studio is still a hazard and fits pretty well for the two kids. And as for the characters, I see them meeting Ori or Joey Drew. Overall, I can see this going a lot of different ways. Then we have Meline and Drifter. While we do know more about this group than Cuphead and Nico, there was, for a good while, no clear thing that would just work. Which was until I discovered and got into Off. Off may not be the most well-known indie game, but I think it's certainly one of the most important ones. This thing not only predates Shovel Knight, yet has a very dedicated fanbase, but is responsible for 2, technically 3 games he featured in Indie-Cross. MORO also said that Meline and Drifter would find themselves in a very dark world, with dark most likely meaning messed up, and Off certainly fits that. Then there's the Batter, who fits really well with this pairing. We know that who Meline and Drifter are going to meet will be fairly obvious, given what MORO has said about it, and after doing the math, yeah, this meeting does feel obvious. We have 2 people dealing with some kind of ghostly affliction that represents an illness, and one of those suffers from panic attacks under stress. What are the chances that they don't cross paths with a character focused on purifying people and ghosts, who also has an attitude that would certainly stress Meline out? The Batter is also a fairly durable character, being able to definitely compete with Drifter. However, I will say that it's not perfect. MORO said that there's a specific Easter egg in episode 2 that alludes to it, but while there is this small thing, I haven't been able to find much else. I mean, maybe the Bat could be hinting at the Batter while referencing Jacket, but that's too much of a stretch. Then there's also the fact that Meline will use some things that they don't usually use, and Off doesn't have a wide variety of tools. Now, as I said, I'm making this with the possibility of other worlds in mind, but it's still something worth considering. Still, I think the Batter is very likely for Indie-Cross. I mean, the entire subreddit seems to agree with that. But with all that said, I think it's time to wrap this all up in a nice, easy to understand package. So if I am right, this is a brief rundown of what would happen. We will see a brief showing of V1 vs Good Doctors before we cut to the title card. Then we will cut to Shovel Knight landing in Waterfall and meeting up with Zag before flip-flopping between their plot and the V1 vs Rogues plot. Eventually, V1 gets petrified and the Rogues realize that Charlotte is growing her new body. As they try to get to her, she teleports away, leaving her to cross paths with Shovel Knight and Zag. Zagrias then sacrifices himself to get Shovel Knight an unlikely but maybe frisk to safety. Then we'll see V1 wake him in a golden dimension with a grill beast before we roll Undertale-style credits. Then in episode 4, we will tag along with Meline and Drifter with a B-plot of either Frisk if they aren't in episode 3, or V1 beheaded and Ghost. Meline and Drifter will meet the Batter, assuming he is an alright guy before doing something very questionable. Then the Batter will inspect them, find out that they are haunted, and dedicate himself to purifying them. While that's happening, we will finish up with whatever the B-plot is dealing with. Respective goals are reached, and we roll to either Celeste or Hollow Knight style credits. Then, in episode 5, we will have Cuphead and Nico do a lot of their shenanigans, as we deal with whatever remaining B-plot we have. Then we roll either Celeste or Hollow Knight credits, depending on which one wasn't in episode 4. Overall, this timeline is a bit messy, but I genuinely think it is at least plausible. And I think that's the best I'm going to be able to do for now. I'm glad I can make this video so I can at least talk about this series, because it may take a while before I can get around to analyzing episode 2. So again, subscribe if you want to see that. But with all being said, I gotta go back 6 feet under, but I'll catch you guys later.